All right, for now, looks like success. I will go ahead and call the July meeting, Board of Animal Health order. Gary, would you be so kind as to call the roll?
Dr. Ashley Armstrong, Keith Beer,
Present.
Virgil Bremer,
Here.
Brad Fisher,
Present.
Dr. Abby Halpern,
Yep.
Dr. Dimple Hall. I think you're muted, Dr. Hall. She is online, but we're not hearing her. So I don't know if that's on our end or. Okay. Dr. Hartwell,
Here.
Ty Harwiger,
Here.
Larry Hopkins,
Present.
Dr. Ragland, here, and Dave Hart.
Present. All right. That's quorum. All right. Next, we'll start off with recognition of employees' years of service to the board.
Okay, got some slides.
We've got a stack full today.
We do, but we have one and soon to be two in person today. So.
Okay.
Technology is not good stuff. I know.
You're fine.
All right.
Perfect. So for 5 years of service, we have Chad Haefling with the Meat and Poultry Inspection Division. We have Jeff LaFoon for 5 years of service in the Meat and Poultry Inspection Division. Let's see if we coordinated our. And then we have one who is here today, Brandy Harden with the Animal Programs Division for 5 years of service.
Oh. Bigger Brandy. Thanks.
Then with the Dairy Division, we have Autumn Foster for 10 years of service. Autumn is in Southwest Indiana. And then Brandon Wright with 10 years of service with the Meat and Poultry Inspection Division. And then Dan Dole's 15 years of service with the Meat and Poultry Inspection Division. Dr. Maria Cooper with the Avian Health Division. She is here and will be in shortly. She's covering a call for me right now. So about IPAP vaccine. So we figured that should be a priority. So Maria will be in shortly and we'll make sure she gets that. And then last but certainly not least, James Larison with the Dairy Division, Dairy Inspection Division with 20 short years of service. Thank you.
Well, we definitely want to thank all of those individuals for their years of service. If we didn't have, I guess, the continuity that we have here at BOAH, then we wouldn't be as successful as we otherwise would be. So definitely appreciate that. All right. Next, moving on to minutes of the April meeting. Hopefully everyone had a chance to review either the paper copy or the electronic copy that Gary sent out. Do I have any additions, corrections, or deletions? Not hearing any, I would entertain a motion to approve minutes.
Second.
Motion made by Ty, seconded by Virgil. All those in favor, we're going to have to do roll call, aren't we? Because Dimple. All right, Gary, please.
Keith Beer,
Aye.
Virgil Bremer,
Aye.
Brad Fisher,
Aye.
Dr. Hafner,
Aye.
Dr. Hall.
she dropped off at 3:20.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Dr. Hartwell?
Aye.
Cy Harberger?
Aye.
Larry Hopkins?
Yes.
Dr. Ragland?
Aye.
Dave Pardon?
Aye.
And Dr. Hall?
She's just coming in.
All right.
There you go.
Dr. Hall, the question is on passage of the approval of the minutes.
Aye.
Thank you. Pass 10-0.
All right, thank you for that, Gary. Next, we'll move on to technical services and Denise's update on.
All right, good morning. You've got my report in your packet. If you have any questions, I'm happy to take those. Just considering something that we can highlight that we're doing in public information, just to give an update. We're doing a lot of updates to the website because we've migrated to new software for online presence. Also, in social media is always a tough space to work in because we manage some social media accounts. But the one we really found a lot of success with is YouTube. And just to tell you what we're doing there, we've got 2 YouTube channels for this board that we manage. And we put like our lunch and learns we do quarterly. We've got other various presentations that we have up there. The one specifically targeted toward, it's called Indiana Veterinarians, if you look that one up. One of the other things that we keep on there are tutorials for practitioners who may have a question about how to fill out a CVI form because maybe they only do 6 or 7 of them a year and they don't remember, but it's Saturday morning and the office is closed and they can't get any tech support. So we have some brief just-in-time training videos, excuse me, with different aspects on there. And just in the last quarter, we've had over 35 hours, almost 36 hours worth of viewing time off that YouTube channel, which is, I thought, pretty good. Over 426 views, and that our CVI, small animal CVI video is actually the most viewed ones. Other interesting statistics off of that, our next most popular videos are how to handle animal bites and also canine brucellosis. We have another YouTube channel that's just general, targeted toward producers, animal owners in general as well. And we've had over 32 hours of view time in the last quarter on that one as well. And you might find it interesting. We also have some training videos for the dairy sector we keep there. And dairy milk tanker drivers have been topping out with our views on which videos are popular. But Asian longhorn ticks, and then this one's the really interesting. Our number 3 most popular video is carcass disposal. I don't understand. We did a lunch and learn on that in 2024, but it is still up there in our top 5 for popularity. So anyway, so if you have interesting enough for veterinarians, registered veterinary technicians, you can get continuing education credit from watching videos on there as well. So just passing that along if you have clients or neighbors or whoever that needs some information. Sometimes you can get some resources there.
Okay.
All right.
Any questions for Denise? Okay, thank you, Denise. Gary, Chief of Staff report, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We just went through our years of service recognition, and we're certainly thankful for all the folks that serve BOAH and the years that a lot of people have put in. And we've had some pretty significant turnover lately. I just wanted to hit some of those highlights. Patrick Hatch, the director of our dairy division, left to join the American Dairy Association of Indiana. Matt Hochschild, who is here today, and we'll be hearing from later, has been promoted to take that role. Matt's been with the agency for about 10 years as basically the lead of our plant inspection activity. But he has more than 36 years total of experience in the dairy industry, working in and managing dairy plants, et cetera. So we're thankful that Matt's decided to step up and take that role. We've been successful, and veterinary positions are always challenging to fill, but we were very pleased to have Dr. Justine Chaley. So she's here today. She's one of our new district in South Central Indiana. And then on the Board of Veterinary Medicine front, Brittany Van is now our attorney for the agency, and she's also continuing to lead the Board of Veterinary Medicine, but we needed someone to come in and assist with the day-to-day functions of that board. And so Dana Brooks has come come over from the professional licensing agency to take that role just recently. She's had several years of experience managing professional licensing boards, including on the Board of Veterinary Medicine board when it was at professional licensing agency. So we're very excited to have her. We were also successful in hiring a dairy plant specialist, and a couple of meat inspectors and animal health specialists. And we have more positions that we will be recruiting. Listed there, but I want to talk a little bit about turnover because that's something that's certainly been on our radar recently. You know, in the first 6 months of 2026, we've had 16% of our meat inspector roles turnover. So that's 7 of 43 inspectors. In the last 18 months, 5 of our 15 dairy division staff have turned over. That's 34% of the division. And none of those were retirements. So those are all folks who left for other opportunities. And then in animal programs, in the last 7 months, we've had 2 district veterinarians, and we have another one who's retiring at the end of this calendar year. So it'll be another district veterinarian this year. And then 2 animal health specialists and the program director all turnover. So turnover is something that we're increasingly concerned about, trying to manage and trying to take a look at what we can do to manage that. A couple different things happening there is one, we do have folks who are, let's say, aging out or retiring. And so at one end of the spectrum, at the other end of the spectrum, we have new folks who've been with the agency or with the state for just a few years. And of course, in the current budget, we've not had any increases in salaries for state employees. So if someone's retired in the last 2 or 3 years, they've likely not had an increase in salary during that time. So those folks are looking for opportunities. So what are we trying to do within our current budget and our current framework to deal with that? One is when we do hire now, if there's any reason at all, based on education and experience, we can hire above the minimum salary of the range for those roles. We're doing that. We've been pretty successful in getting most of those requests approved. We have to go through the process to get those requests above the salary approved, but we're doing that. I've submitted a plan to the state personnel department for approval, which would create a senior inspector level classification for each of our frontline inspector roles. So there'd be a meat inspector, dairy inspector, and animal health specialist. Right now in those roles, there's no opportunity for a promotion and therefore a raise unless you do a different job. In other words, you leave become a supervisor or do a different job within the agency. So if this is approved and we're able to implement it, that would allow those folks an opportunity after some experience and training to have a promotion and still remain in that inspector role. So we're hoping that would help with retention. Within the dairy division, of course, we have a new leadership there. Nathan Campbell is staying on as our assistant director, but then to round out the leadership team there, we've promoted a couple of folks. So now we will have 4 positions that are chief milk production supervisors, essentially our leadership team. So a leader for plants, a leader for farms, a leader for lab evaluation, a leader for the ratings function. So we were able to promote a couple of our mid-career folks into those roles and to help retain them, both entertaining offers from outside the agency, and so hopefully that action will help us to keep them. Within the meat and poultry division, we are utilizing what's called a working lead. So we have 7 geographic areas in the state, and so within each of those, we designate inspectors to be a working lead. They're essentially the right-hand person for our area supervisor in that area, training and doing other things. And so with that designation, we're able to give them a little bit of a raise. So we do take advantage of that for those folks. And then spot bonus for the high-fat AI response that we've been engaged in since October. We did a month and a half ago, do a spot bonus for everyone that's been involved in that. Acknowledge the extraordinary effort in that area. So those are just some of the things that we've been working on to try to help with recruitment, retention, and morale. Just this week, the governor did announce that state employees would receive a one-time bonus. that's helpful. We appreciate that. So that was just announced 2 days ago. Any questions on personnel before I move on to the budget?
Gary, I would just ask, can you just clarify for me on the actions that you're proposing to take to address the churn and turnover? Which of those can we do within a house and not have to seek approval from state personnel agency?
None.
That's what I thought you were going to say.
All of them except for the career ladder have already been approved, and we've already
Okay.
implemented them. But the career ladder one is pending. I've submitted that. Yeah, everything has to go through the Office of Management budget vertical, how much includes the state personnel department, the state budget agency. So those requests are filed, and then we answer questions.
And the above minimum salary hiring is a negotiation every time.
And then, and I'll talk a little bit more about the career ladder thing here in a minute, after about budget. Budget on the second page of my report, you'll see a little chart there. That's just a reminder of the current budget, which is the same as it was in the last biennial, but for this biennial budget, which is FY26, and then which just ended, and FY27, which is July 1 of this year until June 30. These are the general fund appropriation dollars from the state. For FY26, as you can see, we had as all agencies did, had a mandatory 5% reserve. So the actual appropriation was reduced by 5%, and then that was what we actually could use. We were able to come in as of June 30th this year under that number, so we didn't meet the budget and reserve. And we are now creating the spend plan for FY27. It's due next week, I think. And so we will again have that 5% reserve for FY27. We'll see if we're able to hit that this next time. There's some pretty significant cost increases we're expecting for things like insurance, information technology. We got a notice from our Indiana Office of Technology, our IT. They sent out a notice to all state agencies projecting what they thought our costs would be in this fiscal year. And they expect for Board of Animal Health a 22% increase. So that's over $100,000 increase in our IT costs for this fiscal year. And of course, there's another video. You expect to find that. So, so we'll see how that goes. As you can see also on there, I've listed the Animal Disease Diagnostic Laboratory because the state general fund appropriations for that, for the ADDL come through this board and through the Board of Animal Health. And so for the current biennial budget process, the state, the operating line item of $5 million, the 5% reserve was applied to that. And so that money came to BOAH, and that was sent on to the You'll hear a lot more about that. So as we look towards the next biennial budget process, which has already started, the way it works is that we get instructions from the Office of Management Budget, State Budget Agency, on how the agencies are prepared their budget request. We put that together. There's lots of different parts to that. And then we submit that downtown. They review it, and then between now and the end of basically this calendar year, they put together what's called the Governor's Recommended Budget, which is then introduced in the General Assembly to start that process. So we take it from there. So our goal as an agency now is to meet the deadlines, which essentially by mid-August, we need to have all the information for animal health and the animal diagnostic lab requests submitted to the state budget agency on all the forms, formats that they want it. So that includes such things as a vehicle needs assessment, which has already been submitted, a strategic workforce plan that's almost done, but we have to submit that. The good news is that for this biennial budget, the budget instructions are that we can start with our base appropriation for FY26 without the reserve. so that we're at least starting with the current line item appropriation. I don't think I mentioned, but I would mention that we did not have to do a 5% reserve for the meat and poultry line item for this biennial, for this fiscal year, or the FY 26 or 27. That program is essentially 50% funded by USDA, and so if there's a reduction in state funding, then that, of course, reduces the federal funding also. So we're thankful we did not have to do a reserve for that, because that would have severely impacted the ability to provide program services at the current level. And so for FY 27, then we do not need to do a reserve for meat and poultry either. As we prepare the 28-29 budget, I think I mentioned the base. The other thing we're working on are change package requests. And so this would be requests for additional funds either for current services or for new services. A little bit different this time around. The Office of Management Budget says that they're going to take care of requesting additional funds for agencies for current services for things like information technology or things like that. So we won't have change packages for that specifically because they're supposed to be taking care of that for us. But then we'll take a look at new items, and essentially that would be requests for additional positions, as an example. So we anticipate that we'll be requesting a few additional positions, probably 4 at this point. Details to that together and provide information to you. And then, of course, we're also, while we're doing all of that, it's time to present any proposed legislative efforts to the governor's team for evaluation to see if that can move on. And other things that we're considering the veterinary student loan repayment program, which we mentioned before last session. So if that is an agency initiative, there will be a request for that also. And then the ADDL, of course, which I'll get more about. So, are there any questions about the 28-29 budget process? I'm going to move on then, just a little bit about mentioned legislative initiatives. Just a couple of new laws that took effect July 1, so these are already passed. And, we're getting inquiries about, so I'll just mention the new ones. House Bill 1424, which is home-based vendors. Main item here for essentially this provides an exception to the Indiana Department of Health retail food code for some items that people prepare and sell from their homes. So the main questions we're getting and the message we're trying to get out is it did not change the meat inspection laws, it did not change the dairy laws. So therefore, whatever you apply with the meat inspection laws or the dairy inspection laws prior to the July 1 and to do afterwards. But we're getting a lot of questions there in terms of what people can do and sell from their homes for those products. We've also participated in more than one meeting or webinar with local health departments, Bureau, and others, answering questions. The other main item that kind of indirectly impacts BOAH, the animal abuse and neglect criminal code changes. So we've updated the Board of Animal Health staff on those and also made adjustments to the BOAH Animal Investigations Academy online training modules, which are used by local animal control officials or law enforcement officials to get information on laws relating to animals. And so we've updated that. I mentioned the 2027 General Assembly and what we may and may not have as an agency initiative. Apart from that, we've been spending a lot of time on the rule evaluation. Ron's had a couple of different executive orders with respect to rules that we're working on. And then there's also been changes in the readoption process. The rules of the board expire every 5 years now rather than every 7. So we have to evaluate those and re-adopt those on a regular basis. The readoption process involves extensive analysis of a number of different things before it comes to you. So if all goes well at the October meeting, you'll have an opportunity to re-adopt them. rules that will otherwise expire, I think. That we're in the process now, and those through the LMD review process. So that you can see them in October. Then we're also working on some proposed rules that you may see in October, at least for a first look. Changes to the CWD, waste and disease rules. And also as a part of the rule evaluation and repeal and update process that we're going with all rules. We take a look at the swine rules, specifically swine brucellosis and rabies, see which parts of those rules are still needed, which ones are no longer needed. And so we hope to bring that. And then the Board of Veterinary Medicine, of course, is doing an extensive review of all of their rules, which haven't been updated for a while, so we continue to work. And then I'll just mention the technology front. We hope to, we know about August, finally go live with our placement animal health database, Ag Enterprise, based in USA Herds. It's about 2 years behind schedule, but we think we're finally there. So we're hopeful that that'll go well and we'll be able to move on with the database. Any questions?
Gary, I've got just a quick question on the calls you've been getting, asking questions on 1424. Are they mostly from individuals looking to sell products from home, or are they local health departments?
Both. A lot of health departments have questions about what's going on, what's not, that sort of thing. And I think a lot of it is, there was a provision in that law that said that people can sell meat products as long as you meet, and it cites the code giving the inspection law. But the fact that it specifically said meat products in there has confused people. They think that somehow something's changed. So that's been our message, is that we still need to follow those rules. And then of course that raises questions, what are those rules? And a lot of people place or don't know, so opportunity.
Okay.
That's been good.
All right. I was just curious because I know our local health department, the food inspection side, I think we're initially worried that the sky was going to fall. They're going to be having to deal with listeria cases all over the place. And I said, I don't think that's the intent. But
There's a lot of discussion.
Okay. Sure. Any other questions for Gary? Okay. Moving right along. Next item on the agenda will be the report of the animal diagnostic lab. So, Dr. Hendricks.
Good morning, everybody. So in your board packet, you have the one-page ADL quarterly update, and the first 2 bullet points are going to be covered in the PowerPoint, so to prevent redundancy, I'll save those. But the third bullet point on our report, I just want to highlight a few updates to personnel that are coming shortly. We're pretty excited, actually, about some of these changes. So we have one to report is Dr. Nellie El-Shafai joined us on July 1st as a faculty member in the college and at the ADDL. She's going to be the section head of a new section that we're calling molecular genomics. So that's basically going to help us separate out our sequencing, next-gen sequencing bioinformatics work in a separate stream that will allow us to expand quite well. Also, Dr. Rahul Nelly is joining us on August 3rd as our molecular diagnostics section head. So this is the position Dr. Becky Wilkes was previously, and many of you knew her. And he's coming to us from Iowa State University. And he's very enthusiastic. I feel like he's already working for us. He's ready to go. Also, another exciting update is our poultry diagnostician position is going to be filled later this fall by Dr. Mason Sohail, who will join us from the University of Illinois. So those are all big, exciting updates for us as we get those important faculty positions filled. We do have an open search for 2 faculty pathologists and 3 3 technicians I have listed here in our histology, parasitology, and immunodiagnostics section. So that's just typical turnover and searching to get those filled to so with that, he's going to help me with the technology here. We do have some slides prepared for you guys to go through this morning. I just also want to highlight, so I'm here as the director of the lab. Also with us, we have Dr. Bowen, who's our associate director of ABDL, and my boss, the Dean of College of Veterinary Medicine, Dr. Brett Marsh, who many of you know, I assume. Are all here, so if I leave any gaps or there's questions unanswered, they are here to jump in. How would you like? Okay, I'll do whatever you say. Something like that. Okay.
That's not much.
Okay.
I'll just put it here. Okay, let me, sure. Here goes.
That's great, thank you. All right, so our intention is to use our time with you this morning for 3 purposes. One, to provide some historical context related to the ABDL's strategy and our finances, sort of as a baseline for the ask. The second part is to explain our budget ask that you also should have in your packet, several pages with more detail that we're going to go through. And finally, to outline some options for laboratory facilities. So that's sort of the 3 parts of this presentation for today. So I'd like to kind of set the scene with this 6-year budget review. I apologize for dwelling on this slide for a little extra time, but I think it's important just to kind of set the tone of where we've been and where we are. Okay, so first line here is the appropriation. So I just want to highlight this $3.7 million figure. That was our baseline state recurring appropriations for many years. In FY21, it's a little bit lower, and that's because there was a 7% withholding during COVID, so that one's a little lower, but that 3.7, if we went back further in time, that's the number you would see for many years. So in FY24, we received an increase to our recurring budget of $5 million. So that was a big change. Thank you to this board for making that happen. And that has continued at the $5 million level. For FY26, and this will show again in FY27, the number's a little lower because of a 5% withholding on that $5 million. So it was appropriated at $5 million because of a 5% withholding. So that explains that. So that's our appropriation baseline. Sales and services in the second row has also increased over time. In FY24, there was a pretty significant bump. That was largely due to a comprehensive fee review we launched that year, and we addressed some fee discrepancies that had not been updated. Also that year, we launched canine genetics testing, so that provided a surge of income. And then in 25 and 26, it's continued going up, and that is, again, just increased test flow and high-path avian influenza. So I want to also point out that this table does not include grant funding. Typically, we receive between $200,000 and $250,000 from NALM, which is the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, which is part of USDA, and about $45,000 from VetLearn, which is under FDA. And those grants typically support salaries, our AABOD accreditation fees, a little bit of travel, a variety of things, sometimes small pieces of equipment, so it just depends on the year and how those financial proposals are written, but we do have that support as well. The bottom line, we'll jump down to there, highlights in green if there was a surplus, in red if there was a deficit. So those 2 red years, again, were very typical. If you looked back further in history, we typically ran a $200,000 plus deficit for many years. FY21, again, that's our COVID year. There was a surplus that year because of some subsidies we received for our staff that were performing COVID testing. But typically we were at that negative 200 until we had that increase to our base up to $5 million. So in FY24, the surplus is largely due to new positions we created in conjunction with that request and that increase, and this just took time to fill them, right? So they weren't filled for a while. And again, there's been other turnover, like I just mentioned, we have some new faculty members on their way, and the increased revenue explains the other surplus numbers. And those numbers are being reinvested strategically back into the lab, and I'll give you an example later of some equipment that we have purchased. And been able to purchase only because we had surplus dollars. Okay, little more numbers, and we'll move on to some other things. So this graph represents 21 years of state appropriations. So the gray bars are the state appropriations. And you can see kind of, again, how they stayed at that 3.7 million for quite a while, dipped down during COVID. And then we had the bump here, the 5 million, but these last 2 years, there was the 5% withholding. The gold bars represent total lab expenses. We only have it going back to 2019 in this graph just because there was an accounting system change that's a little bit more difficult to pull those older numbers. So for this today, we have it back to 2019. And the line shows the percent of our total expenses that are covered by the state budget. So this is, again, just a different way to look at the numbers. But one thing we can understand from reviewing this historical data is that the ADDL state appropriations haven't kept pace with inflation and increased costs of running the lab. So I'll talk about the AICE report in a minute, but a piece of data from that, when he looked back 20 years, that was in 2022, he showed that the 20-year comparison for inflationary differences for the adjusted budget was actually a loss of 45%, or 1.7 million to the ADDL's budget. So in other words, we only corrected for inflation over those 20 years. It was as though we had a 45% cut to our budget. So that was a really key finding from his study, which I'll get to in a second. If you fast forward to 2026, so now we're including the years with the increase to 5 million, and you do that same 20-year look back, comparing for inflationary changes, it was a lot better, but it's still showing an 18% cut. Again, not keeping up the cost of inflation. And again, back to that line of what percent of our expenses are covered by the state, it's ranged up to as high as 70%. And over these last 3 years, though, unfortunately, that percentage has gone down to less than 50%, again, because of increased cost of business. Okay, so that is your baseline finance review. And now I want to jump into a timeline. We've had a lot going on over the last few years, and our advisory committee has seen some of these slides, but we thought it was important to share with the board today, so everyone had the same context going into our budget request. So I'm going to start with that 2022 external review that I've already highlighted, already referenced. So Bruce Akey, he is a retired lab director who's an associate state vet. He's been very, very active in our national organization, AABLD. So he came and did a very thorough review of our lab. He interviewed, let's see, I have 15 internal stakeholders and 12 external stakeholders as part of his assessment. He dug through all of our financial data. Like I mentioned, he already highlighted some very important points. So I have a couple slides on this. I don't want to read them all to you, but I do think it's important to give you, again, sort of a baseline for the lab. So a couple of highlights, again, state funding had not kept pace with inflation, and some of our needs were related to staffing, so additional positions, improved retention, focusing on our supervisors to build a better culture in the lab, and then, of course, the focus on facilities, whether it's improving them in some way or replacing them. Operationally, this was not news to anyone, but we needed a new software system, or LIMS as we call it, and it's business intelligence tools so that it was easier for us to pull those financial data, and a formal process for fee review. So those are just a couple of highlights. Some other outcomes specifically from this is we revised our advisory committee to include key agricultural leaders. That was a great piece of advice. I think that has been very successful, having those individuals on our advisory committee. He kind of guided us to our more aggressive state budget request, which will be on the upcoming slide, 2023. And a couple of these I've already mentioned, but you get the idea. He was really giving us a nice framework to work with. He did a SWOT analysis of the lab with all these interviews he conducted. So I won't read this again all to you, but a couple of the strengths were our dedicated staff and dedicated and innovative staff and leadership. So our people are one of our huge strengths. Our molecular lab really stood out as a strength, in our quality system. And I'm very proud of that because that's required for our accreditation, and we do a really great job there. Some weaknesses would be, again, software for our lab, staff turnover, which is clearly something we need to address. And there's some opportunities and threats, and these are kind of rewritten in a different way on the next slide. So I will fast forward here. Okay, so he wanted us to focus on, again, adding the ag execs so that we would have more support with our budget asks, improve our staff recruitment. For facilities, he wanted us to prioritize the West Lafayette lab, bring it up to operational efficiency. And I want to highlight this term here in case you're not familiar with it. So he says, explore BSL-3 options to achieve NALM level 1 status. So this will come up again later, but just as a baseline here, so NALM, again, is the National Animal Health Laboratory Network, of which we are a member. They have level designations for their labs, and level 1 is the highest designation. To be a level 1 lab, you have to have BSL-3 space. So BSL-3 is biosafety level 3. We have biosafety level 2 lab space. So basically that is a higher level of containment lab space than what we have currently. That'll come up again later, so the bookmark in that. All right, and then the last point was he wanted us to have a strategic plan. He said you guys need a living 3 to 5 year strategic plan to create a roadmap, and that's coming on a later slide here. Okay, so fast forwarding to that 2023 budget request, which came on the heels of receiving the AQ report. We had done a study for a project to renovate our necropsy space that came in at $24 million. And we whittled that down in the ask to only ask for $10 million. And we also had a request for increase to our recurring funding for some new positions. Again, a lot of this came right out of the AQ report. So we wanted a safety specialist, a data specialist, client services vet. We have all those now, I'm happy to say. What we actually received, again, we did get the $5 million recurring, which was great. So this table at the bottom shows how I get my arrow going here. This is how we asked for it. I'm not going to use the arrow. The top part of that table shows what our request was. So you can see we had an incremental increase 4.8 and 5.1, and the state decided to give us 5 both years for simple math. I think that was fine. That was great. For recurring, we asked for $1 million for the limbs, and then $10 million for that project, which again was really a $24 million project. So we asked for 11 in non-recurring. We were awarded 5 in non-recurring. So I break that down to be 1 for the limbs and 4 for the renovation work in the necropsy space. Okay, please interrupt me if at any point it is unclear and I need to go over something again. I know this is a lot. So with that money, again, we filled those new positions, which is very exciting. It took a little time, but we got those people. We are moving forward with the new limbs. We are going with a product called Core 1 for labs from Trace First. We started our implementation last month. We anticipate this being approximately 1-year implementation, but they're so organized. I was telling Dr. Bowen on the way here, I just feel like it's going to be ready way sooner because they're really great to work with. But let's say this time next year, I think we can safely say we'll be live with that new software. So that'll be a huge improvement to the lab that's been talked about for many years. So we're excited about that. And then as far as our renovation work in our necropsy suite, again, this is in our Reed Laboratory in West Lafayette where this work is being done. Phase 1 was replacement of our incinerator. So this is a picture. You see our incinerator, there it is. There used to be a lot of space in that room, but this new incinerator is very large and takes up the entire room in our basement. But it is done, that part of the project, and phase 2 of the project is replacement of our walk-in cooler. So this, on the right side, that green box is outlining the walk-in cooler. It's underway, and we anticipate it being completed within the next month or 2. So that's exciting news, all good progress. Thanks to the funding in that budget request. And this is my one example I'm going to share of reinvesting in the lab. So this slide is highlighting digital pathology. And so instead of us having to come to the state with our request with a list of all the equipment and software we needed to do digital path, we had this opportunity to take our surplus and reinvest and get this going without delay. So we purchased a few pieces of equipment. There's a slide scanner, a cover slipper to make that process more automated, and then all the pathologists got updated computers, so they have really great graphic cards for reading these slides, and we got software specifically for organizing the digital slides for a better workflow for our pathologists. And there's still a long way to go. So it's working right now. We have this up and running, but there's a lot of opportunities just around the corner with AI applications. So we still need our human pathologists to read the slide, but there are tools that can be developed to help them assess tumors, for example. So that's a whole new frontier we're excited to keep pushing into. So this is, again, an example of reinvesting our surplus into the lab. And the strategic plan. So moving on to the next kind of 2-year period or so, it took us about a year total working with a facilitator, Ken Andrews. Some of you may have met him during this process. We came up with this one-pager. It is not currently on our website due to accessibility laws. So we'll figure out how to get this back up online. But it was released in January 24. We have a list of 7 strategic priorities, and I'm really proud of the progress we've made in these areas. And other meetings, I've used these as kind of an outline as we present updates to our constituents. The one I want to highlight today is number 7, which I have bigger on the next slide, so don't try to read that. And so that is to invest in state-of-the-art equipment and facilities. And the subheading was formulate capital budget plans to upgrade facilities and operate as a non-level 1 laboratory, which, as you now know, includes having that biosafety level 3 containment area, and to play a prominent role in national programs. So I want to expand on that just a little bit more. So we are participating in outbreak responses. You guys know that, right? And currently having only BSL 2 level labs does not limit us. The concern is in the future for new emerging diseases, we would be very limited in our ability to participate in those responses if those are classified for BSL 3 level labs. And that is why it is very important for NALM to limit their level 1 designation to labs that have BSL 3, because we don't know what the future holds, and it is possible that we would not be able to respond or participate in the response without that BSL 3 containment level. That's sort of the context about that and why that was really important to us. So this leads us into our Perkins and Will study. So Perkins and Will is an architectural firm that has participated in designing several state diagnostic labs and the USDA's National Bio and Agro-Defense Facility, or NBAF, in Kansas. So they really know what they're doing, have a lot of confidence in this group. We engaged with them and asked for 2 deliverables. We said, we want you to show us what it would look like to build a new lab in West Lafayette, and what it would look like to renovate and or add on to our current laboratory in West Lafayette. And with both of those plans, we want to be a cell 3 lab space. That was kind of a baseline criteria that we gave him. All right, so there's a lot of numbers here. Don't worry, I'll walk you through it. So so what they did was they assessed our current laboratory space and our current workload. They also worked with us to project our future workload based on trends and tests and some other factors. And again, they've done this with other labs, so they have a formula for doing this. So you can see in that second column, the first column with numbers, it's our existing square footage. So ASF stands for assignable square footage. So it's a lab space, it's an office, it's not a stairwell or a hallway, if that makes sense. It can be assigned for a purpose. So we currently have a little over 31,000 assignable square feet in our current facility. And what they designed based on all of this assessment for our future program requirements was 57,000 assignable square feet. So a 76% increase in assignable square footage is what Perkins & Will says we need based on our projections. And while I don't have calculations for this, even our current space is not enough for our current workload. That came out during those discussions too. Next, okay, so the two columns boxed in with yellow shows the renovation and addition option. Okay, so some of it remains in the existing building and some of the square footage is now in the addition. And then on the right column, that's what a new building would look like. In both cases, we end up with about 57,000 square feet of assignable square feet, which is the goal. The gross square footage is different because of the efficiency factor, so it's more efficient to build the new building. Again, less wasted space, less hallways and corners and nooks and crannies that we can't assign. So it's more efficient with the new building, that's why it has a smaller gross square footage. And then what would this look like? On the left, okay, I'm gonna try to use the mouse. So I'm gonna try to point at our current lab. That's us, that gray building in the bottom left. Oh, good, the mouse landed on it, on the bottom left. Oh, it's gone. That's where we are now. Okay, so the purple building in the left picture would be the new facility. If you're familiar with our lab, there's a courtyard there, and then there's some stairs to go up a level to a parking, or there's a building there now, but that's where that would be situated. That's where the design was designed. And then on the right side, that shows us keeping our current facility and just adding on to it and renovating. So that's kind of the vision of those two options. And I'll kind of give you like some later information now, just to say, in the end, it was more cost effective to go the new construction route as well. So not only the bottom line cost of the facility, but also the disruptions to our workflow, right? Because with the renovation, there would be a lot of having to move lab sections around while they remodel their space, and it would take a longer time, which also adds to the overall cost. But we'll come back to numbers in the end. Okay, so now we've gone forward a few years and we're at our 2025 budget request. So we requested increased recurring funds for staff reclassification. And this is tied really directly into AP's recommendation that we needed to focus on retention and recruitment. So we have a plan for reclassifying our staff and some increased salary support. And we did not get an increase to our recurring. I can try to read it. Again, do you have any questions up till now? While we have a pause.
Jared, are you in? Oh, it's plugged in. Oh, it's
Well,
It's not even coming up.
I will, while they're working on this, for the benefit of some of the newer board members, this has been a process that's been long in coming, and the larger capital ask that I'm assuming is going to come at the end of this is something that those that have been on the board for a while will understand. Those that have been on the board, will know that, we're coming to this logical conclusion, hopefully. But I guess I have a question about, I know we're just on the front end of the limbs replacement. Does Trace First work with any other animal labs such that the formatting that practitioners will see when they're making submissions, it will look familiar to them? Does that question make sense?
I think so. So it is definitely used in multiple labs already. Okay. So it's a common use product, tried and true, which gives us a lot of confidence with it. And we have some ability to customize what our reports are going to look like as we go through this implementation process. And then the other side is there will be a portal, an online portal for submissions too, which will make things a lot more efficient. I think that's what a lot of the clients are looking for.
Yeah. I remember that was one of the big asks.
Yeah.
In the early.
The portal?
Yes.
Yeah. And it does that.
Okay.
Oh, I was just starting that.
Next slide.
And the change in fixed rate, so it's- Something I didn't say with the 23 budget. After a lengthy discussion in this very room, the board decided to go ahead and approve that 10 million ask for our renovation with the stipulation that we did the strategic plan. I failed to say that earlier, but this is all very, like you said, very logical progression based on discussions in this. It's okay, it's the slides are this.
That and
There we go.
I guess one of the other points, again, for the newer members that haven't been on the board very long, to understand, for years, this budget request was, even though in statute it said it should come from the Board of Animal Health, was being run through with Purdue's budget. So consequently, it was either zeroed out or flatlined almost every year. Hence what Dr. Hendricks was showing about how the budget never increased, and this was actually a decrease because it didn't keep up. There were no adjustments for inflation. And then, a few years ago, the exact timing escapes me right now, the board decided to make sure we took back over that responsibility of having that budget for the ADDL run through our budget request as opposed to Purdue's.
Good, thank you. Okay, back to 2025. So I'll kind of start over on this slide since we got diverted. But our recurring requests for increase to the recurring funds were, again, for support of staff reclassifications and salary support. The non-recurring was some additional renovation work, some equipment we have on the list, and we asked for preventative maintenance, which is a category that was new to us that year. We didn't really know that existed previously. So while we didn't get an increase to our recurring funds, and in fact we have the 5% withholding, unfortunately, we did get the non-recurring preventative maintenance. So it's still considered non-recurring, but it shows up in both years, and you'll see we're asking for that again this year for this cycle. And that's been very helpful because, again, our accreditation relies heavily on a lot of things, but one of the things we have to show is that our equipment works, and having preventative maintenance agreements is not inexpensive, and we have a lot of equipment across the lab. So that funding has been very, very helpful to us this cycle. So again, we didn't get increases recurring, but after the fact, so this was a very pleasant surprise. After the session closed, the state budget agency awarded us $686,000 in R&R funds. So this stands for repair and rehabilitation. So this funding was not to be used for adding new technology or new equipment, but rather to replace existing outdated equipment. So we are using this to get a new piece of equipment for our toxicology lab that is very outdated. It's called ICP. It is what we use for trace mineral identification in a variety of different tissues, or sample types, I should say. And this is going to allow us to get new thermocyclers and the molecular diagnostic that are some of the ones on their way out of age. So that was great news. So we're using that very strategically. Sorry. Well, I can kind of keep talking. Our next slide takes us into this last part of our timeline, which is working with Hanover Research. So in preparation for the upcoming budget cycle, we knew it was coming. And also while we were waiting for some pricing to come in from the Perkins and Will study, We engaged with Hanover Research, which is a market research and analytics firm. Oh, there it is, thanks. And they broke their work down into these 3 areas. So there was a market assessment, a market opportunity assessment, and an economic impact study. And I am just going to share a couple of slides from Hanover that I think fit into the context of today's conversation. If Denise will let me.
I'll just do it.
Hmm.
It'll be fine. There we go. Not that one.
No, that's good.
That one went, okay.
It is. It's just it's not showing the presenter mode, but that's okay. We can
Well,
make that
presenter
work.
mode seems to be frozen.
Is that the problem?
So that's the
Okay.
problem.
We'll roll with this.
Go with this.
It's just really tiny font, but we can try.
I can try to enlarge it a little bit.
Okay.
I know, something's happening.
So this slide, with very tiny font, I can tell you, is basically just highlighting some agricultural benchmark data. So it's just giving some numbers for some of the major industries in the state. So that's really what that is. A lot of that will look familiar to you guys. It's fine.
Yeah,
I'll keep talking.
it's a great day.
It's more just fun facts for the next couple
Great
slides.
day. Here you go. All right, that's what I have. How's that?
We can make that work.
Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. So again, that's our Indiana baseline ag data, just to show agriculture is very important in our state. Got it. Okay, next slide. Yeah. Okay, so our conversation is heavily focused, I feel like, on agriculture animals this morning, but we would be remiss to ignore the almost 3 million pets in Indiana that also need diagnostic testing, I will remind you. And with almost 70% of Indiana households having pets, this places Indiana in the top 10 states for U.S. pet ownership. So this came out of the Hanover study, and I thought that was really, really interesting. And we, like I said, we do provide diagnostic testing for companion animals as well. So that's also an important part of our business too. And then the next slide from them is about economic impact. So a little bit tricky to explain, and again, I know the font's kind of small, but this calculation for ROI is based on a 2018 study from Iowa State's diagnostic lab. And it shows that there's a 795% ROI for every dollar invested in the laboratory during what we call peacetime or absent an outbreak. And during the animal health emergency or outbreak, the ROI increases dramatically to 3,104%. Sort of unfathomable, right? So for this past year, in which obviously we were in an outbreak status for HPAI, the $5 million invested in the ADL by the state resulted in over $155 million in returns to the state of Indiana, based on this calculation in this study. So epidemics or outbreaks, they magnify the economic risks of under-testing and the value of fast local diagnostics for agricultural business continuity. And that's our job, right? That's what the ADL is here for. So that brings us, can I just do this? Okay. So that brings us to the end of the timeline phase of the presentation, and I'll switch over into the actual budget request. Any questions though before I move on? We're good? Okay. All right. So again, you have a 3 or 4 page long budget request summary in your packet. And this is just going to go through and highlight some of the things and explain hopefully clearly what it is we're asking for. So okay, so we've included these heat maps here just as a reminder of the major industries that the lab is serving and where they're located in the state. So from left to right, these maps represent beef and dairy, poultry, and swine. And the redder or even yellow means really high density. So that's how you can read these maps. And so our request at a glance, we are requesting increases to our recurring funding. So we want to maintain that 5 million base and then add targeted investments in people. Also some one-time funding for sequencing capacity or some equipment related to that I'll explain. And again, we want to keep that preventative maintenance line. So I'll go through this in a little more detail in a second. Now, I just want to pause for a second and talk about high path avian influenza. Why this matters now. So we have been in outbreak status for quite some time now. And if you look at the numbers just going back to January of 2025, we've performed over 76,000 PCR tests for high path avian influenza. In a normal year, we do about 5,000 for surveillance. So one way to look at this, I like, numbers don't lie, right? So we have crammed more than 15 years of routine AI volume into 17 months. One way to look at it. And I think our staff feels that. But why this matters now, why are we thinking about sustainability of our services and our workforce? Well, this is why. This has been a strain on our staff and highlighted some concerns that we as the leadership have about staff retention and morale and the limits of our facilities. We didn't have room for more. We were using every assignable square footage that we had available. So this is just to pause and say this is why these requests I'm about to share for more people are so important. And you've also probably heard this. If not, here's your first time. We like to think of the AVDL as an insurance policy for the state, right? We're here to serve livestock and poultry producers, veterinarians, animal owners, wildlife and public health partners, and of course our state and federal partners as well in testing and response efforts. We are, frontline for rapid testing in these disease events. And so I want you to think of HiPath as a model, right? It's our recent experience with this prolonged activity and what we've learned that we need to ensure a sustainable response. Don't think of it as just for poultry. Like this could be for any industry that requires outbreak testing. Okay, so the two main investment areas are first, workforce capacity, retention, and outbreak readiness, and secondly, equipment modernization and preventative maintenance. So for workforce capacity, retention, and outbreak readiness, we have a couple of subpoints here. Okay, so you might remember from the AICI report, he talked about sustainability, investing in our workforce, recruitment, retention, these things. That's what we're trying to do here. So the top line there, the 6 new high-level technical positions. So our vision here is that these would be high-level positions, so very experienced technicians. We would plug them in various areas of the lab, depending on their specialty, their expertise, but they would all be cross-trained on outbreak testing. So when an outbreak occurs, when that surge testing is needed, we have the people ready to go, ready to mobilize, ready to put into those positions so that there's no delay to our testing. And currently, without this, we were relying on overtime. So again, straining our current staff. We've had temp support provided to us from USDA. And we've also redistributed our staff, even from the HEKI lab. We had 2 technicians from HEKI lab trained in molecular and come up and provide support. We've had technicians from other lab sections in our West Lafayette building relocate to help out with either accession or molecular. So it's worked, but it's been hard. And looking forward, this is our strategy that we think provides that sustainability that we need to provide that continuous service. So aside from the 6 positions there, we also are asking for 1 new position for sequencing and bioinformatics. As I mentioned earlier, we're separating out our molecular diagnostics and molecular genomics so that we would have that increased capacity. And this, again, would be a pretty specific person we're looking for who has that bioinformatics knowledge. That's a pretty unique skill. And then again, we're going to ask for staff reclassification funds, as we have the last couple of times, because we really need to address that for workforce retention. And even though we've asked for staff reclassification in the past and not received it, my hope is that this year that increase will be awarded, and because I think now more than ever, we and our stakeholders are acutely aware of the importance of workforce stability. So I'm hoping that one sticks this time. Okay, now the second investment area is equipment. So the first line there is a MALDI-TOF. So that is a big acronym that is basically for an instrument that can identify bacteria very rapidly. It's a mass spec, so it doesn't rely on, those of you who've had microbiology labs, you might be imagining all your colorful biochemical tests. This is not that. This is, you load it in, within 30 seconds, it tells you it's E. coli or whatever it is. This is the technology we've had in West Lafayette since 2000, let's say November of 2013. It was a memorable day when we got that. And so what we want is this instrument for the Kiki lab so that they can have the same workflow we have. Not only does it make things faster, but it also broadens the list of bacteria that they will be able to identify. Currently limited because they're relying on traditional biochemical tests. We want to get that for the Kiki lab. And then the next two instruments are both related to our molecular laboratories, and they are instruments that will provide automation. Rahul Nelly, who I mentioned earlier, is joining us on August 3rd as the head of our molecular diagnostics section, has a lot of experience with automation, and so he's bringing a lot of these ideas, and I'm very excited about what the future holds for our molecular lab. These instruments are going to help us get to that peak efficiency, operational efficiency in the lab, and ultimately increase our capacity. So those are instruments that I think are very timely, considering what we've just gone through with HiPath and the fact that we have an expert coming on board. We need to get these so we can get these implemented into our workflow. And then the last line is that preventative maintenance. I've already mentioned a couple of times. We definitely want to add that, have that on the request and keep that coming because that is very critical to our work. And the summary statement at the end: reliable equipment is not it's not optional infrastructure. It's the backbone of turnaround time, accreditation, and our outbreak response. So, our little summary about equipment. And this slide was just, I've already mentioned it, but just to one more time mention how we are going to be expanding between I think it's the PCR lab. So that's the PCR test for detecting pathogens in samples, right? So that's do a ton of. And then we have NGS, or next generation sequencing, and there's all kinds of sequencing. Bioinformatics fits into there. So that's where we can characterize pathogens. That helps us to participate in epidemiologic investigations and provide really critical information back to our state and federal partners about disease movement and new strains and things like that. So we have a really good plan in place to expand in this direction and provide that support. And of course, all this information leads to the action and the response.
Petra,
Yes.
quick question.
Yeah.
The characterization, is that like right now, pardon me, everything gets sent to iOS? No, not to iOS, well, to Ames,
Yeah.
to the NBSL. Like, would that enable Purdue to be able to do some of the work that you now have to send off and wait for?
Yes.
Okay. Maybe they still
Yeah.
at some point need to bless things.
That is
or
correct.
is it-
Yeah.
We would be able to get things started,
Okay.
and then while it's working on our side, we still are forwarding the samples on, so Ames already would have
Right.
samples that they're doing their confirmation testing on, that then they would do their sequencing, but we would be able to provide BOAH with a faster
sense
answer.
of exactly what it is. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks, Becky. And this, again, just as a kind of a reminder that our current surge model is not sustainable. Like I mentioned, the overtime, the pulling people from other areas. We really need these additional investments so that we can have that workforce retention, maintain our turnaround times for what you guys need for response. And all the while, just want to highlight our routine diagnostics are happening in the background too. Even during these outbreaks, we're still providing routine diagnostics. So HiPath has shown us that high consequence animal disease events are no longer short-term disruptions. At least not this time. And so our bottom line is that this request is not simply a laboratory funding need. It's a strategic investment in Indiana's animal agricultural economy, emergency preparedness, regulatory response capacity, and long-term resilience. And I hope that is clear from what I've shared today, that we are just a piece of the bigger mission. And you have this in your package. Your packet. I know it's again tiny font, but hopefully you can see what we've presented here is that the recurring funding at the top is asking for the new people. So 7 new people total, and then funds to allow us to reclassify our staff positions. And then in the bottom, you see the preventative maintenance on a line, and then the 3 pieces of equipment, the moldy and the 2 liquid handlers for molecular. Any questions about that? Because that's really the summary of our ask as presented. Okay, one more school slide before I talk about facilities. This is, again, just another way to look at numbers, because maybe you love numbers, I don't know. But this goes back to FY23. At the top, it shows what we requested, and the bottom, what was awarded. For 26, 27, we listed the whole 5 million, but you can take 5% out of that if you want, because technically we had that withholding. So anyway, that's just a summary, if that helps for understanding. Okay, so now I'm going to move into talking about facilities. So, we've done all this work with Perkins and Will, like I mentioned, and you also may recall, if you've been around a while, there have been plans for a new facility down in southern Indiana, where our current Kiki lab is for quite some time. You may have seen this. So we thought we'd present this as 2 different options. So on the left, we have option 1, which would be the new build in West Lafayette, which came in at $148 million. In case you're curious, the renovation and addition came in at $171. So $148 million for the new lab in West Lafayette, and then that escalated price from the Kiki design that we've had for a while is $21 million. So that's option 1, new building in West Lafayette, new building in southern Indiana. Option 2, we are presenting renovation option for West Lafayette at $20 million, and essentially that is the money that was never funded from that first project, that $24 million project. Because we still have a to-do list from that. And again, the Kiki lab for the new southern lab at $21 million. So option 1 would be the better goal for a comprehensive long-term strategy, especially keeping in mind the Perkins and Will study that showed we need more space. 76% more space, in fact, is what that study showed, right? So option 2, we're not getting new space. The renovations will help with some efficiencies, some workflow, but it's not, I don't want anyone to think it's an equal option as far as our long-term goals. But for near term, less investment at this time, we still have replacing the Kiki lab and then that $20 million for investments. So I'll break this down a little bit. So this is a schematic of the design for West Lafayette. Again, came in at $148 million. I need to read all this to you, but it's basically our current work that we do now with allowing expansion of that. Including BSL3 space, remember that's an important feature that this option 1 would have that the renovation I just mentioned is not going to have, right? So this would give us that BSL3 capacity. And then this is the Southern Indiana project. So at the top I have it. So this is included in both option 1 and option 2. Okay, so this is a new build down in Southern Indiana, again escalated to $21 million. And that is a full service lab. Currently they lack space for molecular diagnostic testing, but this facility would give them space to perform PCR. So that's an expansion that would happen there. They do a lot of poultry testing, and you may think of them as a poultry lab, but they also are equipped with a hoist and rail. They do the big animals too. So they again, I would consider them full service laboratory. Just a little bit smaller scale than what we have in West Lafayette. And if, for some context here, when the AAPLD audit teams come to assess us every 5 years, they break up, and part of the team always goes down and sees the Kiki lab, and every year that's on the list of something we have to address. So even though it's a 5-year accreditation period, every year we have to submit a report to AAPLD telling them what we are working on, whether it's windows or whatever we're doing. And we've told them this year that we're bringing this forward to the board. So like they want to know that we are actively doing something to address that facility because that facility needs to be replaced. And that is a known fact and has been for many years. So this would get us there. And then the renovation, again, this does not address all the concerns, but what we would focus this on would be the sample receiving accessioning area. So that's one area specifically during outbreak events, we need kind of a separate space to get those samples into the lab efficiently and into our laboratory information systems and software. So that would be a focus. Renovating some laboratory spaces. Again, we talked about bringing on automation in the molecular areas. That is going to require some reconfiguration of the lab to allow those instruments to work properly. So we have a couple labs that are trying to decide which one is the top priority, but we've got a couple that would rise to the top for that. And then necropsy, carcass handling, biosecurity, waste system. There's a lot of stuff that is still not done from that original necropsy project we've referred to a few times. So the flooring, the plumbing, non-glamorous things that need to be addressed. There are also some basic building things like HVAC, windows we need to address, and then the final is just some workflow capacity issues that we can address. So that's kind of a summary of how we would invest some renovation dollars into the lab.
So to be clear,
Mhm.
it doesn't add any square footage to the existing building. It's just fixing the things that needed to be fixed 5 years ago.
That's correct. It kind of feels like that meeting in 2023 where I was told that they would approve the funding, but go do a strategic plan because maybe you need a new building. And now here we are. Yeah, no new square footage. And this is that same slide again, just so you can see them side by side. So again, option 1 is the new lab in West Lafayette and a new lab down south. Option 2 is renovations in West Lafayette and a new lab down south. So this is just one way to present this information. And then I thought you might be curious how other states are responding to these similar needs. So I have a couple examples for you here. So Iowa, this was their phase 1 laboratory, so it came in at 72,000 square feet. And I'm guessing this is gross square footage, but I'm not 100% sure about that. It was funded at $75 million. 63.5 came from the state, and they received $4 million in private gifts and $7.5 million in university funds. And again, this is a phased approach. So this particular facility accommodated about half of their operational workflow, and they prioritized the moving the workflow there that had the highest biosecurity risk. So again, half of their operation in that facility. Ohio, 100% funded by the state at 72 million with 70,000 square foot size. And then also in Pennsylvania, they have added, or in the process of adding, a smaller branch lab that is not full service. So I want to point out, in case you're shocked by the price tag, so this lab is to focus on some specific serology tests, parasitology tests, and some PCR tests. So it's a limited scope, but that's just another example of what's been going on in nearby states. And then our last slide. So these are our people. And I told Craig on the drive up here, I was like, I kind of got emotional last night looking over the slideshow and seeing these people because they have really tried. We have a really, really great team. And the work you see coming out of our lab is only possible because we have great people. So at the top picture, that's our HEKI staff, obviously a little smaller footprint there. And then down at the bottom is our team from West Lafayette. I promised them this year I would try to get our group picture before it was winter. I was delayed last year. So anyway, so again, I just want to highlight our people are amazing. That showed up in the SWOT analysis with Bruce Akey as well. But we really have a great team, and they're what makes things work. And that's why it's so important to me that we give them the support they need, so they're not having to do all the overtime and double duty to get the work done. Right? We want them to have a sustainable experience with us. So that's it. Any questions for me? Or I can turn it over to my boss.
So years ago, Dr. Thacker did a presentation about the BSL-3 facility that was approved, that eventually wasn't constructed.
Right.
So what you're proposing now, would that have research space for research in it, or would it just be workspace for the diagnostic lab?
Yeah, we did not design it for a research space. The project we did with Perkins and Will was just focused on the diagnostic lab. So just enough BSL-3 space for diagnostic work. That's how it's currently designed.
Dr. Hendricks, thank you for the presentation. I did reread Dr. Akey's report, and my first question was answered. This will get us to a level 1 BSL-3 facility.
If we get BSL-3, we would, yeah, because we check all the boxes. That's what's been frustrating for several years. There's the other criteria to be level 1, and the criteria we were missing is BSL-3. So that would get us there. Yeah.
And the other thing that stood up to me as I reread his report was the marketing and outreach. And I kind of added to that within state lines and outside state lines. So does this set up, I guess, if it's in our mission, does this set us up to be able to, market ourselves outside of state lines?
Do you mean what, the new building or just
Well,
which?
I mean, if we want to, if we have a top of line lab facility, would we want to reach outside the state of Indiana?
Oh, sure. And
more.
we do get some samples from outside the state
Right.
already. It just depends. But yes, we have a lot of ideas of some areas we want to expand, including toxicology, doing some endocrine testing. I think we have some really unique possibilities that would attract out-of-state business. Yeah.
And the other thing on Dr. Akey's report, part of his SWOT analysis, one of the threats he mentioned was competition from other public and private labs. So, I mean, this sets us up, if we move forward with this, to pretty much set us top the line, would you say?
I think so. I will say the competition with private labs is kind of its own beast because they have their market share of like the software within clinics. You guys probably know this better than me, but so a lot of their, I'm trying to say, it's hard to go off and do testing somewhere else because it might not integrate directly into your system or populate. But they've got things very streamlined and user-friendly for their clients. So it might be a little challenging for us to break through to that. But I can say, actually, just this past week, I was talking to Dr. Burcham down at our Southern Lab, and he has a local clinic that is frustrated with the corporate lab and is going to start sending him biopsies. So great, let's take that, and run with it. But I think there's other challenges to competing with the corporate labs, but we'll be able to do the work and do it well, and honestly for a lower price than the corporate labs do. So I think there's an opportunity there to get that business. Yes.
And just one of the comments I had when I was reading through Dr. Akey's report and then your report and listening to it today, and I am by no means any lab expert at all operationally or anything like that, so just take it for what it may. But us going out and hiring 6 new high-level staff, and Dr. Cooper, it seems like high-path AI has been forever, right? But hopefully someday some of those, hopefully it comes down a little bit, and if we market ourselves outside of the state lines a little bit more, and things inside of Indiana slows down a little bit more, there's kind of a need to help keep staff busy, if you will, So.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be bored.
Okay.
If that's what you're getting at. Because I think there's so many opportunities we have to expand, but people are so, they've got their head to the ground, like getting the work done. With a little more capacity, we really have the opportunity to grow, like adding tests, expanding techniques. Yeah, we have thought about that. This isn't just like a fix for a surge. It's more of a bigger picture strategy that with the need for surge testing, we have the people.
Yeah, and that's just a comment for me, just
That's
straight dollar cents and bang for the buck and taxpayers' money and all that stuff, so.
I'm impressed you read Dr. Akey's reporting. That's great. Thank you.
95 pages, I believe it was.
Which, just to add to that, one of the other areas that we haven't mentioned that we're looking at expanding into, Dr. Hendricks mentioned the endocrinology, but also within each of the sections, brought new tests on in the past. The last 17 months have been really constraining on us, our ability to really do some of those things. But we've challenged our section heads and others to look at the research and development side of things and what can we do, what can we bring on to either work with either industry partners or just to develop the pipeline of new testing for what's needed at our laboratory. And that's one of the areas that I see these additional folks helping us with as the routine technicians are tied up for their day-to-day work. And some of them have been kind of focused on that in the past to kind of doing the new test development and bringing those on. This is going to help provide that day-to-day support. People are out sick, vacation, we've got an empty vacancy because of turnover reasons and things that way, that during that peacetime period, these folks can either fill in or offset with one of those other duties to allow us to maintain what our norm is while still moving forward with things rather than kind of chasing our tail trying to keep up.
I was going to ask the chairman, is there a time for stakeholder questions today? Or
Yes, we will definitely
Okay.
have that, Mr. Canary. I've got a follow-up question to Ty's. Going back to your early slide that was showing the projected growth in testing and then the requisite need for increased square footage, I'm wondering, and I did not go back and reread the entire thing. I just glossed over parts of it, but I guess I want to make sure that we're aligning what our ask is with what we think the need will be for testing. So I guess, will we have, are you just basing that off organic growth and then new tests that you're going to be able to market? Or is there a thought that with a new facility, we could claw back some of the lost submissions that are now going to Iowa State? Okay.
Yeah, no, good question. So again, Perkins will walk us through this assessment, and they've done this before with other labs, so we followed kind of their formula, but a lot of it was looking at growth trends already existing, compounding that with new tests. And then some of the design is specifically to address your second point, which was to have like a separate molecular, with two molecular workflows for expected negatives, which is what we don't have now. So yes, I think both are being addressed.
And then the other part of that too, to play into it, was like we've also kind of been paying attention to what's going on with USHIP and what that need is going to be as that process moves forward, and will there be a more regulatory routine surveillance need for screening testing be a requirement, and with the expansion of the molecular lab, splitting those workflows into the diagnostic realm of everything, and then also kind of that expected negative for the bore studs and other folks that way to keep to minimize any cross-contamination that might occur, play into that realm as well.
I will now open this up to comments from the stakeholders or questions from the stakeholders at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I guess piggybacking off your business volume question, I know this would be an oversimplification, but is there a way to translate the projections that Perkins and Will was using into an annual testing volume number, which is kind of the way, it's just a really quick and simple way to compare relative size of labs from state to state. If you think about Iowa State running whatever it is, a couple million tests a year, But then that 72 million only accounts for a portion of their facility, and I don't know what percentage of that facility you can attribute to what percentage of samples. I don't know how to do that. But then, like Ohio's running 800,000 samples, and then where are you guys right now? Just testing volume?
You know, off the top of your head.
I should unplug that number right now.
We can get you that answer.
Because I'm with David. I heard more specifics today than I have in the advisory committee meetings about how it sounds like the Perkins and Will proposed facility is designed, you know, in concert with the business projections. It's just, my discomfort is trying to figure out how realistic that is to achieve that testing volume, because what you don't want to ask for is the biggest, best version of this lab, and then you have all that unrealized potential, and then the legislature's wondering why you asked for the full amount. That's what I'm trying to wrap my head around. And then the other thing I was wondering is, because any of this takes a certain level of cooperation with the university, and where are they at as far as support of alternatives?
Want me to take that one?
I would like for you to, please.
I'm Brent Marsh, and I appreciate the opportunity to address. Do I need to stand in a particular spot here since we have this? Could I ask your question again?
The options that were presented today in discussions with the university, do we know what range of ideas they would be supportive of?
Yeah, great question. As David mentioned earlier, this is routed in a new way over the last, this will be the third cycle. The statutes were written decades and decades ago, but the reality was that the ADDL would prepare a budget, presented to the Board of Animal Health. In my experience, one was never turned down, and then it was returned back to Purdue to become a part of the overall Purdue ask. As David also indicated, functionally what happened is that the university budget goes to the Indiana Commission on Higher Education. They evaluate it, and frankly, all those line items, which the ADDL is, will be flatlined. So that's why you saw that long period of time. So we have proposed in 2022 for the 2023 session that we do it the way the statute prescribes, which basically says the board of the appropriations for the laboratory would route through the Board of Animal Health. And that's why we're taking an hour and a half of your morning, because it's a different route, but you can see the benefit of doing so. It increased the budget considerably, the operational budget to $5 million, and that keeps that consistently going. And yes, there are inflationary challenges and 5% cuts that we dealt with and all those sorts of things, but nonetheless, overall, it's been a much better situation. Really appreciate the support on the maintenance agreements just to keep the equipment going. It's $375,000, big chunk of change, but to Dr. Hendricks's point, there's a lot of equipment to be maintained in order to continue to provide the services. Then the additional $680-some thousand that came out of the R&R funds, but another opportunity to continue to enhance that overall pool. The university, Purdue University, and I have asked that they say for the $148 million Perkins and Will project, the new laboratory, if it was a Purdue ask, it would not move. The only opportunity it has is being routed through the Board of Animal Health. So that's, I've talked to the provost, I've talked to the treasurer. So if it was a Purdue ask to the legislature, they would not, because they have other projects that they are moving forward at the university. So if it's routed through here, and that's why we're again presenting it to you, whether it's the new laboratory, the regional laboratories, renovation of the ADDL, et cetera, that's for the board's consideration. But Josh, that's where the university is on this particular ask.
Thanks.
You bring up slide number 24.
Dr. Marsh, can I ask a quick
Yeah,
follow-up?
please.
So if this board approved that and it went through the BOAH budget and made it up to the State House, do you think Purdue would work against it, be neutral, be generally supportive, like?
That
do they
I
give you
couldn't
a-
speculate on, to be
Okay.
honest with you. That would be, we'd have to see how that runs through. Great question. Now, again, I've already asked, and so
Right,
it was the 148, I know what the answer is on that one. And so I wouldn't suppose they would change their position. On the other hand, if it's an industry-led initiative through the Board of Animal Health. We'll give it a approach.
thank
Great question. I'm still learning too.
yeah.
I want to bring up the heat maps again because these are a BOAH product and they've been used to good effect. I think, Ty, they were in the AICI report. The reason I'm bringing them up is as we talk about regional laboratories like the HEHE laboratory in Southwest Indiana, I don't know how many of you have been there. How many have been to the HEHE lab? Okay, well, good. It's an intentional effort. Right? At least from my experience, when you go down here to Du Bois County. So if you're in Du Bois County down here, this is where that laboratory is located. It was built down there in the 60s. Hickey, some of you know where the Hickey name came from. Dennis Hickey was a state legislator for a number of years, and that's where the Hickey name comes from. It was named for Dennis Hickey, the state legislator. So it's been located in that area. Thanks for the arrow. It's been located in that area for a long time. So you can see the density of operations of various types, cattle, poultry, and swine down in that area based on those colors. As we look to the future, one of the things that we've also considered is, so why is Hickey where it's located? Well, it's located on Purdue property. The Southern Indiana Purdue Agriculture Center, SIPAC, that's why it was built there, because it was already Purdue ground. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, you're good.
So that was the reason it was located there. It is an operational farm. There's a goat herd there, there's a cattle herd there, et cetera. And so to bring things that have died of who knows what, may be a rather high risk for the Purdue operation on that site. So there has been some conversation about, so is a better location for it? Could be a lot of different places. One of the things that we have discussed at the university is there an opportunity to partner on regional sites? So I talked to the president of Vincennes University, for example, and said, would you be willing to host one of these diagnostic labs? Now, I know this is a recorded event, and he may hear about this later, but nonetheless, there's no commitments. I just said, would you consider something like this? There could be a possibility that we could collaborate university to university, two institutions, to take a look at a full-service laboratory in Southwest Indiana. Heretofore, that diagnostic laboratory has not been. As we know, it doesn't provide PCR testing, and so for the industries in this area, then they're coming to the ADDL West Lafayette. Also, as you look at that map, if you look to the northeast corner, it looks like stormy weather, Dr. Cooper, right? With all of what's going on in that area. And so if we're looking at a regional laboratory, whether it's for high-path AI, PERS or PED testing, or whatever happens in the SHIP program in the future, and heaven forbids we end up with African swine fever, as you can take a look at the southwest corner, you have even more density in the northeast. A lot more activity in that area, and certainly we've experienced that over the last few months. It seemed like years, I'm sure, but certainly over the last several months. So I actually had a conversation with the president of Huntington University up in that corner. And we already have a relationship with our college to Huntington University. They offer an online veterinary technology program. Dave Perry's the leadership of their agriculture program there. I talked to the president of the university, Robert Pepper, referred to as Dr. Pepper, and I'm sure he's heard all the stories. But nonetheless, we looked at another, is it possible to do a collaboration there? Now, they don't come cheap. They're $21 million a piece. But they would be closer to the sites of production if you chose to go that particular direction. So that I wanted to also talk about, we could talk about one tie in the southeast corner as well. Maybe there's a collaboration in that area. But I will admit to this group and others that satellite laboratories have been closed by other states, but they've generally been laboratories that were for bench diagnostics. This laboratory that we're talking about and the services offered at Hickey are post-mortem. So you're talking incinerators, coolers, that's gonna make it more expensive. But one of the things that we've learned over the years, that HEKI has diagnosed things in post-mortem that they don't find anywhere else. My figures are correct, Craig, and Kenitra, correct me if I'm wrong, but post-mortems down there still lead. We do more post-mortems at HEKI than we do in West Lafayette. And it's because of access. And we talked about Iowa State. We know a lot of samples get shipped, either to Iowa State or elsewhere out of our state. They won't put a cow or a pig in a box. Those diagnostics are really important, and particularly if you get to some of these areas of the state. We didn't list that as an option, but that could be another option as well, that you could have a couple of satellites plus the renovation at the West Lafayette site as well. So that's another, I wanted to at least present that option to you. I've had a couple of very, very early conversations, just an oral conversation with those, the leadership of at least 2 institutions. It was mentioned in the report that Pennsylvania does this. So Pennsylvania gets so many dollars from the legislatures and put out requests for proposals for other institutions to collaborate. The big, big difference there, and you saw a $6 million figure there, is when they're collaborating with an institution, it's just for bench laboratory. We're not doing any diagnostics from a necropsy standpoint. No coolers or incinerators, that's why they can do it for $6 million. But I think there's opportunities for us to take a look at some other options across the state as well. I'll also admit to this group that when Perkins and Will launched into this study, I thought those figures would come in more near what Dr. Hendricks had on her slide for the Iowa first phase and for what took place in Ohio, $70 to $100 million, and it came in at $148 million. So I think it gave the university pause. So we were looking for other alternatives to present to you, because I'll be quite honest with you, I don't want to miss this legislative cycle. Otherwise, you're talking about 2029. And we know what we've experienced in 25 and 26, even with high path avian influenza. And so to go another 2 years, I don't want to miss this cycle. So I wanted to present you, and Dr. Hendricks and Dr. Bowen, and frankly, the teams have done a remarkable job trying to get this information put together and keep up with the diagnostics demands that we've had. So I wanted to present that slide again, some other ideas and some other options that could be explored. Happy to take your questions, and really appreciate your service on this board. I know there's some newer faces around here since I moved on to other pasture, but I appreciate very much your service on the board. Questions to me?
So I'm going to build just a touch on where you were and where Josh was, and like, as you're trying to pull in this industry perspective of need, are there survey data that are going to be helping show the demand side of the need that'll be coming in, or are we in process on anything like that?
Of additional demand?
Yeah, like numbers of like missed samples or need in state from in industry partner. I know we're talking from sort of the bird flu side of it, but from where, like, and we talk about future demand, but sort of a better picture of current and missed demand, meaning samples that left the state that we could have had pulled up.
I don't have the figures right now, Virgil, of what leaves the state. We did have some information with regard to companion animals, et cetera. For those that are available to us, we get the majority of those. The swine industry for a number of years has shipped samples elsewhere, and we know that, and I think that's Dave's question, if we can, quote, claw back some of those samples, and I think that's certainly a possibility. We have talked to the swine industry. As a matter of fact, I talked to a major swine practitioner group recently, and they're quite intrigued by the regional approach because they could get samples to those sites for quicker turnaround. Some other options that we're taking a look at, we know from a food safety standpoint, from One Health, I know their dairy, meat, and poultry samples go to the State Department of Health lab, whether there's opportunities to advance and take in a broader One Health opportunity. I have meetings coming up the rest of this week about doing post-race testing at our racetracks. Those samples are currently being shipped to Colorado, and it takes 5 to 7 days to get the results, and they don't issue the purses until those results are out. And so the potential to turn that more quickly is also out there. So there are those opportunities. I don't have specific figures, Virgil, but I think in addition to what's already been described, this new molecular diagnostician from Iowa, I think, is going to present some really great opportunities for us. He's enthusiastic. I was visiting with him in May and June. He didn't start till August. He was already telling me about how he was ready to go to work and bring some new ideas to us.
I can add briefly, Dr. Bowen we have some numbers over there just up on the page. So there's some, we participate in SDRS, and if you just pull up the Indiana pigs, so this is not a complete picture, but the Indiana pigs that are tested, 56% of those are tested by our lab, and then 40% by somewhere else. So that kind of gives you a picture for that of the pigs. Out of state.
Within that limited disease scope for
Right.
what SDRS is surveilling and monitoring with all of that.
Virgil, your question, was it in the scope of trying to make sure that we've got that kind of information to share with folks in the state legislature, be it, Ways and Means, or, budget over on the Senate side of things?
Yeah, so like Dr. Marsh was talking, sort of a little bit of sticker shock with where the numbers came in. It was trying to find other ways to bolster that gap of, basically gap of need of why, just building in stronger data around that. Why, like the numbers we just pulled there, the percentages, things where we can show there's a gap that we need, that we could fill. I appreciate future demand, but it's like that current demand that you were asking about is very valuable.
Dr. Hendricks, Dean Marsh, I know you, Dr. Hendricks, on your one slide, you made the point that grant dollars were not included in any of those figures. While I personally feel that, this facility is a benefit to the state and therefore the state should fund it, what opportunities are there for looking at not just with other educational institutions, but other, what opportunities are there within the private sphere to look for either grant or cost share dollars for these new facilities?
I know the USDA bill that came out with the additional funding of, I think it was $120 million from USDA. The university can submit one at the university for approval. And so frankly, the College of Agriculture has a plan that they're submitting on this round. So there could be possibility of future rounds, but it'll take all those build out plans that we have in order to submit, in order to get those kind of approved. We have not looked at this frankly from a development side. So whether it's private donations, that sort of thing to contribute, the pharmacy nursing building that's being built on the campus right now is $130 million. They ended up with about $30 million worth of donations from donors, et cetera. So we have not explored that as a possibility of.
So, and I should know this and I don't, but Ohio State and Iowa State, we were kind of comparing ourselves. Are they both BSL-3 capable? So we're looking to, okay. And we had some conversations recently about BSL-3 and do we need it? Is it worth the headache? I understand it takes quite a bit to maintain it and keep it certified. Does that, have you looked at what does the lab look like without that? Like, how critical is it that we be null level 1?
Right.
Like, I get it. I'd
Yeah,
like for you to be there.
I think, and that's what I was trying to explain earlier, it's really for thinking. Today, we can do iPad testing,
Right.
right? We
Yeah.
can do that with BSL too. It's like what's coming down the road that some disease we don't know about yet,
Okay.
that we would be restricted from. And then all of a sudden, Indiana needs a lot of testing and has to ship it to out of state. So that's it's kind of the future proofing, and Nolan again has made that their priority. Like they think that's one of their most important things they focus on, which is why they have that as a criteria for level 1. And level 1 does come with a little bit additional funding, but not enough to pay for BSL-3 construction.
Okay.
In case you're wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'd be great. I mean, it to help maintain it once we have it built, but.
What kind of discussions have you had with the state budget committee or individual legislators? Are they aware of this whole kind of process over the last couple of years has been going on? And are they anticipating a request at some point, or what kind of feedback have you had? And from Ryan or Jeff or any of the key people?
We haven't talked to them directly. I haven't personally. And so this is the first stop, so to speak. We have been in conversation with the ag executives about preparing for today, but as far as going to the administration of the legislature, we
I mean, sometimes on capital improvements, you know, that takes a couple of years of discussions to build up to the point where you make the ask. I just wondered if that's happened.
That's a fair question. Yeah. Some of this information became available very recently.
I've had conversations with Representative Jeff Thompson, who's currently chair of Ways and Means, for at least the last 2 budget cycles, making him aware that the strategic, well, the research study and then the strategic plan were going to be coming, and that there was likely going to be an ask based upon the fact that you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that there were deficiencies and we're going to need to be some serious upgrades made. Now, do they know this 148 number? No, but they should at least be aware that there's an ask in the offing at some point in time.
What was Jeff's response when you talked to him? Like, get in line, or does he see there's a problem?
No, he understood that there was a need, but that also there were other, demands. Like it or not, we're in a state that is billing itself as a very low tax state. At the same point in time, that translates into low service. So, I think it becomes incumbent upon us to demonstrate, the financial risk to the state for not having a facility of, at the standards that it should be at. You can make the argument whether does it need to be BSL level 2, BSL level 3, how much are you giving up there? But I think he understood that, but the fact that the state budget's in a little bit of churn as they try and figure out what's the right mix of property income and sales taxes, then that's going to be up for debate. I would think that it needs to be probably a full court press, both with the administration and the state legislature and the university trustees, if we decide that this is a path that we want to go down.
Dr. Hendricks, the $148 million, is that the lowest of 2 or more bids? Is that?
So, no, Purdue hired another firm to take Perkins and Lowell's concept and price it. So that's the number of firms. So
Okay,
it's
so
not
there's
been
not
out to
been
bid.
any contractor competition for
Right.
that?
Not at that
Yeah.
stage.
Okay.
I might share, ADDL has done amazing work with older facilities, and, their staff has just been there and without complaint. We're hearing a little bit here and there, but I will tell you, my phone should have been running off the hook for the last 9 months with what they've been putting up with. And so some of it is, in Indiana, we pretty much figure out a way to do it and we get it done. And that's what ADDL's been doing, but I don't think that's a reasonable or healthy approach going forward when we're aware of it. And when you're ignorant of it, that's one thing, but when you're aware of it, it's not responsible, not push for adequate services, resources.
The current ADDL was a wonderful, pristine, brand new facility when I was a young animal science undergraduate. I won't say how many years ago that was, but it's been a few. And the fact that it's not a fine Cabernet, it's not going to get better with age. So looking at doing something is probably definitely appropriate. Just need to, as a board, discuss what we're comfortable putting forward as our recommendation. Gary, is there, I don't want to shut off any other immediate comments or questions, but Gary's informed me that lunch is ready, so nothing else. We can take a 30-minute break for lunch and then reconvene with discussion and see if you want to make a motion about which of these options we want to try and put forward. With that, we'll adjourn for half hour for lunch.